Right guys, welcome to another episode of Golf Juice TV. Today I'm joined by Lynn Blake, who has got 10 PGA Tour Event champions from the web.com, the PGA Tour and the Champions Tour. He has trained over 100 instructors that have been through the Lynn Blake Teaching Academy at Cuskawillow Golf Academy, Eatonton, Georgia. And a lot of success with the students, both teaching professionals and amateurs have all gone through Lynn and have got top national awards in the United States. Thank you very much for joining us, Lynn.
Glad to be here, Chris.
So could we start a little bit with the how you came across the golfing machine and what it means to you?
Yes, I was a very frustrated amateur. I was about 35 years old. I had started golf at 14, and within a reasonably short period of time, got to be a good player. Low single digits, had my share of club crystal, if you will.
Yeah.
But once I got around scratch 1, 2, I did play on a Tactical Air Command Championship team, so I wasn't exactly a hack. But I never could play to the level that I aspired. Obviously, that doesn't make me a whole lot different than millions of other golfers around the world. So I accepted the fact somewhere in my 20s that I couldn't do it. I finished up at Georgia Tech and had 4 years in the service, raised a family and all that stuff, or was in the process. So I couldn't be a golf bum, although I would have been a very good golf bum. I can say that. I had all the appropriate qualifications. So I gave up on being a player, if you will. I mean, a real player. And I devoted myself to my family, my business, and so forth. But I had not given up on what was it. Okay, I couldn't do it. What was it that I couldn't do? I had all the books. I'd been to 1 or 2 famous instructors. Those were the days when there were really no famous instructors. I mean, the Ledbetters and the Harmons and the Haneys, these all were the next generation. But I went to see Jimmy Ballard, and I was reading every publication. I must have had every golf book known to man, this century and the last. But I just couldn't put it together. Lo and behold, along comes this teenage phenomenon named Bobby Clampett, who is beating almost all the amateurs in the world. There's no question he was one of the best amateurs in the world, and most of the professionals. He had a very low finish at a particular United States Open, and it was all the rage in golf world, and they wrote an article. And in this article, they talked about the golfing machine. And here were some terms: lag, drag, and thrust, and accumulators, and wow, I had a lot, but I hadn't heard of that. And then his teacher, Ben Doyle, and the man who wrote the book, Homer Kelly, was mentioned. Well, I had to get this book, so I did. And the only way to get it at that time, you got it through Ben. Well, maybe that was referenced in the article, I can't recall. So I ordered the book from Ben Doyle, who was the first authorized instructor of the golfing machine, and it came in the mail in 1979, and I began to study it. If you never studied the golfing machine, you have no idea what you're in for. It doesn't start with once upon a time and end with they lived happily ever after. No. It does not do that. Part of the problem, in addition to the fact that it's spread all over the book, it's like taking your watch apart and putting pieces everywhere. It's very organized once you catch on to what's going on, but that takes about 2 years if you don't have a guide.
Yeah.
And but everything I understood worked. And it was a whole lot different than what was being taught in the golf world at that time. All the big reverse C's and square to square and drive the legs, all of which I just really couldn't understand. It didn't make any difference to me if I slung my legs forward. I mean, the ball didn't go any further. In fact, most of the time it went shorter. And I'll tell you one thing, by the time I was in my mid-30s, I was virtually a cripple. I mean, I could hardly walk. It's not normal to not be able to go shopping for more than an hour with your wife without having to go back to the car. That's not normal. It's not normal to try to carry your 10-year-old son light bag and fall to your knees with shooting back pains at the age of 35, 36. Okay. It's not normal to go to a PGA Tour event and have to be, remember all this time I'm an amateur, and then have to go to the hospital service there or whoever and have to take you back to the parking lot in a golf cart, passing people 20 years older than you along the way. That is not fun. 30 years old.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I made all the, I went to the osteopaths, and they said, oh, gray hair of the spine. The good news is, the MRIs, there was nothing wrong. I didn't have any slip discs or anything else. I just couldn't move a lot of times. So anyway, but all that was swing related. And I could see that this was different. Oh, and by the way, now, no problems. I can hit golf balls all day. I can up and all day. There's a danger in that, though. But anyway, but it just came about that in this book, there was a certain thing that I could not understand, and it was hinge action. And now in golf, we think of the hinge actions as being the left wrist hinging up and down for power, the wrist cock, if you will. This is not what Mr. Kelly was talking about. And in chapter 10 of the book, these are the variations on. So here's the thing. The golfing machine basically says this. There's three things you have to control: the club face, the club head, and the club shaft. And you have to control that from the address to the top to the finish. And you control the club face with a flat left wrist. You control the club head with what we call a lag pressure point, maintaining the stress in the shaft. And you control the club shaft with a baseline of an inclined plane. So the flat left wrist, the club head lag pressure point, and the straight line baseline of the plane are your three major controls of the face, the head, and the shaft. And you do that from the address to the top to the finish. So that's the triple triad, if you will. The three imperatives controlling the three functions through the three stations. Well, you see, just what I said there sounds like gobbledygook. But it's child's play once you understand the language.
Yeah.
So anyway, but there's one thing I could not understand. In chapter 10, this gal, and the model was a woman, not a man, certainly not a tour player. He was not selling. He just said she was available. She was willing to do the work. Anyway, and he had these diagrams of all this hinge or something on her arm. She looked like, her left arm, she looked like a samurai warrior. What in the world was this all about? Well, there's only one person in the world that could answer my question, and that was Homer Kelly himself. So in the summer of 1980, I began talking with him, and that was led through another guy named Tom Tomasello, who was a good friend of mine. We started studying the golfing machine together. He was in my hometown of Marietta, Georgia. And he went out and saw Homer first in January. He was a retired Marine guy, had a little more freedom than I did, so I couldn't make that first trip. But he made it in January of 81, and I made it out there in January of 82. There were 5 of us in a master class. And I knew before I went, he was an amateur now. I was only amateur in the class. We had 5. But I knew it was going to be one of the great weeks of my life. I knew while I was there it was, in fact, one of the great weeks of my life. And all these years later, I know that it was one of the great weeks of my life. And it is changing the lives of professionals and amateurs by the thousands all over the world. So it was a very unlikely course that I came to Mr. Kelly, but it's been a great ride. For the first 3 years after seeing him, actually the first 2, 82, 83, 84, okay, so it would have been 3 years. I was in the financial business. I was growing my own businesses, and I never left that. But I had a part-time job. You know, I like to say I only worked half a day, 12 hours. Half days of both jobs, 12 hours each.
Nice.
I was in states, giving golf schools all over. And then in 83, Mr. Kelly died. I kept going for another year, and I really had no desire to build it outside the area of the golfing machine. And the wagons were being circled by the estate and all that, and there was very little assurance that I could spend the time I needed to spend to grow it and make the sacrifices, quite frankly, that I needed to make without any longer-term assurances that I would be protected. So, making a long story short, or maybe not so short, I walked away from it. And that would have been in 1984, and I stayed away for 20 years. In true Rip Van Winkle style, I built a broker-dealer, securities broker-dealer, a registered investment advisor, later sold those companies. But in 2004, still active, very active in the business, I got back on this wonderful thing called the internet, and started posting in January. Came up with this handle called Yoda, which has worked out very well. So I posted as Yoda, and I started answering questions on the golfing machine website and then a couple of others, and nobody knew who Yoda was. And for the first 3 or 4 months, and then I came out, if you will, and then it turned out to be great because I gave my first comeback school. The comeback school was in April of 2004 at St. Augustine at the PGA Tour Academy. and then Peggy Curtin Bell's place in Pine Needles that summer, and then it just grew from there. Section players started coming to me, the PGA fellas, and all of a sudden there were section championships being won, there were player of the years being won, professional of the year, teacher of the year. Then with Brian Gay, I got my start with the PGA Tour. He had lost his card twice, and then you look up 7 months after we had started, he'd won over $1 million, and over the next 7 years, $13 million. And not leaving the tour, he won 3 championships under my watch. We're not working currently right now. He's doing some work with some fellows for TrackMan, which is fine. I got no problem with TrackMan, but I hadn't been fired. I hadn't been officially retired. It's just we hadn't done any work. And in any event, it's been a real nice ride there. And then along the way, picked up some other fellows, and it just grew. Doing a lot of posting, over 10,000 posts on Lynn Blake Golf. And then we have our closed group, Lynn Blake Certified, with almost 600 instructors on that. This last summer, you're in the UK, and I understand you're going to have my good friend Chris Moss on.
Yep.
I was in Europe, Stockholm, and then Munich, and then London, certified 35 professionals and 12 amateurs. So that was a real nice run there. Looking like, and we're headed to Seoul, Korea, looks like in July of this year, so I have not been to that part of the world. So we're taking the message. We're taking a system that works. It's not a method, it's a system. These 24 components, 144 cataloged ways to do the 24 things. If you do the math, the permutations and combinations, that gives you roughly 10 trillion ways to get it right. So surely, 1 in 10 trillion, there's a swing for you.
Hopefully.
Yes, for me. That's the big difference. I teach motion learned mechanically. See, the golf stroke itself is an unnatural thing. We don't come out of the womb knowing how to hold the club correctly and how to set up the body motion that sets up centrifugal force and all that. But that doesn't mean that this unnatural thing needs to be performed in an unnatural way. To the contrary, it's an unnatural thing, but it can be performed with entirely natural motions, the same motions we do every time we walk down the street and swing our arms. And that way, number one, the golf stroke becomes much more efficient, and number two, you don't wind up like I got hurt. So that's a big deal. So we learn this motion first mechanically, we align it geometrically, but those mechanics align, now efficient, are then converted into a subconscious field. I like to say that mechanics produce feel, then field reproduces mechanics. We can only play by feel. We are not machines with nuts and bolts and screws and a computer running us.
Makes sense.
We do have a computer, it's our mind. But we got to turn it all, and in the end, we have to, through training, we have to trust this and let the computer, the unconscious mind, run the entire operation. So it's a total field mechanism that we build, and then we turn it loose and trust it.
Absolutely. What you're saying makes a lot of sense. I've been to certain coaches in the past that say, you've got to learn my way, and you swing it the way I believe. But the way that you teach is different.
The player must have the style. Everybody, we're all different. For goodness sakes, we're all different, male and female. And it would be the worst thing in the world to do anything to suppress an individual style. However, they still have to comply with the laws of force and motion. No congressman passed those, and they're not going to be repealed anytime soon. They enforce themselves in golf immediately. The ball does not go into the lake because it's mad at you. It goes there because that's where you sent it.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, you're right. Definitely. So I want to make sure that we put a shout out to your website, obviously, www.lynnblake.com. Lynn, BlakeGolf.com. And guys, it's a wealth. It's like a library for golf. It's unbelievable. You've got to.
We have I think something like 170 YouTube videos too. It's a very active channel, and a lot of what I teach is on there. And people come literally from all over the world because they've seen that, and what they see works. and then they want to get it from the horse's mouth. So
that's one way.
Yeah, the horse's mouth is still moving, so that's a good thing.
Absolutely, amen to that. So, something that I thought was really interesting that I'm talking to different players and coaches. I mean, obviously you teach a lot of very, very successful golfers. What, from your point of view, I mean, obviously it's quite a broad question. What differences can you see between the professionals, the top professionals, and amateurs? You know, it's hard to say. There's so many different things, but is there any trends that you can see between them at all?
Well, just being basic, and this would be something that is very intuitive. Everybody would know that most of these guys and gals have been playing, their whole lives since children, and even more so today with all the junior programs, U.S. Kids, First Tee, all that stuff. They come up and then they're groomed. They can come out like a Georgian Spike. He can come out of college, and compete very successfully right out of the gate on the PGA Tour, and that's not abnormal anymore. At first it was abnormal. It's not abnormal anymore. These guys are coming out. They're virtually professionals. In fact, a lot of them stay in school when they should be on the tour. If they can get their accounting degree later. Right now they've got it in hand. So they've been playing a long time. That's number one. And there's an athletic talent. There's no doubt about it. And these guys have that. That doesn't mean they can bench press 1,000 pounds or compete with Michael Jordan in basketball. But in their sport, they've got a certain talent. Now, a lot of these amateurs, God bless them, and I have a number of them. I mean, the guy brings his son to me, and the dad can't catch a ball, mama can't skip rope, and I'm supposed to teach the kid to be an Olympic champion or something.
Yeah.
At some point, you got to get realistic in the expectations. But and I'm not even talking about the juniors so much there. People just, we're in a sedentary world, a lot of it, and they can play golf once a week at best. There's just limitations. They don't practice. In many cases, they can't practice. There's not even facilities for them to work. So there's just limitations in terms of time, in terms of talent, it just takes a long time. Years ago, at age 50, it sounds like I'm 67 now, but at 50, I decided, for whatever the reason, I was going to learn how to play the piano. And I'll tell you why. Because, for years, I had all the self-help tapes in my car that I'd listened to, and I finally just said, the heck with this. If I don't get it now, I'm never going to get it. I'm going to start listening to music. So I got into Frank Sinatra and all that stuff. And I'd be singing in the shower, and the wife would say, "You cannot sing." So I said, all right, if I can't sing, then by golly, I'm going to learn at least play. And I'd given my kids piano lessons. I never touched the keys. And I had a nice player piano in our living room there, and I said, well, I'm going to learn how to play it. And so by golly, I started doing that. I hired a jazz teacher, and I hired a classical teacher. The classical guy to teach me how to read the music, and the jazz teacher to teach me how to play what I heard in my head. And it was just so cool to do that. But one thing that my classical guy said, he said, Lynn, it takes calendar time. So he could see my frustration. He says, I wish I could pour my 30 years into you because I can see you understand it, but you just can't do it. He said, it takes calendar time and keyboard time. Calendar time and keyboard time. So that is what the tour guy has too, in addition to the talent. He's had the calendar time, and he's had that calendar time on the golf course. The price is very high for that level, very high.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And also the small margins between reaching it and not. I mean, my old coach, Ian Poulter, he's one of the last guys that came through that he started when he was 15, and he wasn't amazing until something just clicked, and then he always had the self-belief, but then he backed up with hard work, and he got to where he wanted to be. But he's one of the few and far between that haven't played. Well,
one of my best friends in golf, I've known him for a long time. He mustered out of the Army at the same time I came out of the Air Force, and we were in the same town. We got to know each other at a little driving range in West Marietta. He'd only been playing golf for 2 years. Nobody knew his name then. He had just graduated from Southern Tech with a 2-year technical degree in industrial drawing. And at that time, the Vietnam buildup was still going strong. This was 1970. And he was drawing airplanes for Lockheed, and decided that he would go across the street and start hitting balls at the old Sam Snead Par 56 golf course. And he decided he liked golf, and then went to work as an assistant professional. You know him now as Larry Nelson.
Wow.
So Larry and I would play on Mondays. That was his day off, at least until 4 o'clock. Then he had to go pick up the range, and they didn't have a range picker, so he had to do it with the pickup the bags.
Yeah.
And I would help him do that. That was a lot of fun. But I asked him one time. I said, Larry, what are you going to do? Are you going to go back to school? Are you going to become a head professional? He said, no, then I'm going to try the tour. I said, Larry, come on. You're 23 years old. You've been playing golf for 2 years. You played well today, but you shot 74. And, there's those guys out there are good. Jack and Gary and Arnie and Lee. He said, I know it sounds crazy, Lynn, but I'm going to try it. Well, lo and behold, he did raise some money in the club. And a year later, was on the mini tours, played in 35 events, won 6, then went to tour school, and in a 7-way playoff or last spot, he got his card. 10 years later, he won the PGA Championship. Another 2 years later, he won the United States Open, and then another couple of years and another PGA. The most feared Ryder Cupper of his generation, did not lose a point for the first 2. Anyway, so I asked him one time, Larry, this is fantastic what you've done. He says, it ain't miracles, Lynn, it's mechanics. Mechanics. So, of course, now he had all the talent, but he had never picked up a golf club until he was 21. Quick story there. He was in a firefight, a vicious firefight in Vietnam. He was in a foxhole with a guy named Mike. Don't know Mike's last name, but Larry's told the story. And but all Mike could talk about was if they got out of this alive, he was going to get there and play golf. I mean, he just loved golf. All he could talk about was golf. And he thought golf was a sissy sport. He was a baseball guy. He had thrown his arm out so he couldn't pursue a major league career. But okay, he says, I'll do it. If we get out of this thing, I will try golf. And that's exactly how he got to do it. His wife bought a set of Sam Snead Blue Ridge, the old Sam Snead with the reminder grip at a garage sale, $35, and that was his first set of clubs. And he started going across the street hitting those original metal woods, in driving range with the orange grips. And so here's my point in all this: mechanics are extremely important. If the ball accepts, force has to be aligned, and force aligned becomes efficient, and that's what we do. We align force. I tell people quite often, I'm not going to change your swing, I'm going to align it. And that's a little bit of an understatement, because in most cases they're not going about it very efficiently. But if one guy wants to straighten his right leg going back, that's fine. I don't mean lock it. If he wants to keep it slightly flexed, that's fine too. If one guy wants to do this or that or the other, and we have 5 ways to move the knees, all proper. And so why am I going to change a perfectly good knee action for another perfectly good knee action just to fit, quote, my method, end quote?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's just too many ways to get this cat skinned.
Absolutely, totally agree. It's and players like Bubba Watson, that proves it. You don't necessarily have to. I mean, he might not be the best person to show, but Jim Furyk, everybody has different ways of swinging it, and as long as you get it where you need to be and it's aligned at the right times, it's
well, impact is what the ball understands.
Absolutely,
right?
That's the most.
And that's where our flat left wrist, our club head lag pressure point, and our straight line, plain line, controlling the face, head, and shaft, get it done.
Definitely.
If you can do that, you can stand on your. If you can do that standing on your ear, fine, because that's all the ball cares about.
And I mean, it leads perfectly onto the DVD you've got on the website, the Alignment Golf Program.
Right. So we did that in 05. I say we. BJ Trolio, who's he's a younger instructor. He's won a Golf Digest Top 40 under 40, and it's since gone on to. Here's another example. He had a lot of talent. I mean, this is an athlete here. He's a little guy. I mean, in terms of height, but you don't want to get in tussle with him. In fact, you want him on your side in a bar fight if you do get in a bar fight, which I have no plans on doing, by the way. My dad taught me about that. One way to avoid bar fights is avoid going into bars. Slippery places, you don't slip. Anyway, but VJ was Golden Gloves champion when he was a kid, so he was an athlete. And he got a hold of this golfing machine stuff too, and later on he's gone on to become the professional champion there in Mississippi, the assistant championships, and quite a player. So we did that in October of 05, and took us a year or two just to get around. He's busy, I'm busy, just to get around to packaging it up. But yeah, it's sold all around the world, and we were in, I think, 4 or 5 printings of it until finally the internet became dependable enough to where we could do downloads. We still sell the DVDs, but most people buy it download, particularly those in Europe and outside the United States.
Of course. Fantastic. And that's just, that shows, is that for players, teaching professionals? Can you just,
Well, you see, it started off, it was just going to be something I was going to stream on my website. And the website was very heavily golf machine oriented, so we throw those terms around. I mean, I explain it, but there is a lot of jargon there. Again, but I explain it, but it moves fast. We bat this thing back and forth like a tennis match. I mean, it moves. But we've gotten rave reviews all around. The first, there's 3 discs. The basics of the golf stroke there. Then the drills in disc 2, and then a third one on putting. So there's 3 discs, over 3 hours of stuff.
Fantastic. Well, guys, if you're interested, then please go along to Lynn Blake's website, and you can purchase it there.
Right. Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on. Much appreciated. It's been an education, and very much enjoyed listening to you.
Okay, and say hey to Chris Moss for me too.
Absolutely, will do.
Lovely guy.
Right, guys. If you've enjoyed the video, please press like on the YouTube thing and subscribe so you can see all of our videos. Comment below. We love your feedback. I mean, this is a great interview, and you can really get some good questions in there. And Lynn, if we get any questions, we'll send them your way, and hopefully be able to answer them from the viewers.
Happy to do it.
Right, guys. Till next time. Thanks for now.